Microsoft and Citibank and BNPP in France, and smaller organizations and municipal organizations and state organizations. And the goal was to put together a coalition of that which we did not feel adequately existed before. And that is cross-sector and cross-border collaboration about cyber intel, and to promote solutions for our most obvious cyber threats across those sectors and around the world for free. So that's what we've done. We'll be hearing about DMARC today, I believe, particularly, and I'm not the expert on DMARC, but what we do know is that the vast majority of the major threats that we've read about in the news that are truly shocking begin by fairly mundane intrusions into companies or companies who are using a third-party vendor. And so we need to, obviously as a nation, and I hope Global Cyber Alliance will provide a piece of this support going forward as a not-for-profit, we need to provide solutions for a whole range of people who want to, and companies who want to harden their perimeters. Now I gotta say, I don't think IBM or Microsoft is going to ask the Global Cyber Alliance necessarily to come in and protect their domain, because they can spend $10 million or $50 million doing that themselves. But what we do have around the world is a whole middle market, just starting there, of law firms, not-for-profits, businesses who can't spend $10 million to harden their cyber defenses and are looking for help. And the DMARC and DNS tools that the Global Cyber Alliance has developed over the last 2 years can play a role in filling that gap. As we look forward to the years ahead, I am just struck as the prosecutor for Manhattan that this cyber threat, to state the obvious, is enormous. But I honestly feel we have so much further to go as a world community, let alone community of sectors in business, so much further to go to help each other by working collaboratively and openly in sharing information to help solve this threat. It's truly, in my personal view, to protect myself, I need to protect my neighbor. If I'm in aerospace, I should be also helping those in municipal government in protecting that domain, because all these threats are moving at machine speed between one sector to another and across borders. And if we don't come together as a world community and a community of many sectors to take this on collaboratively, I think we're missing a huge opportunity. I feel very privileged for our office as a role to play in this organization, and DHS has been a huge partner, not just the way forward. So thank you all for letting me speak. I'm going to stay around to listen to the other conversations. I'm not going to be able to stay for Q&A, but welcome all and thank you. And who's back to you? Thank you.
Thank you. So we've spent the last year confronting the cyber risk of phishing. As the DA mentioned, the attacks begin over email. Studies show 90 to 95% of attacks begin with an email. And we've seen over and over again high-profile breaches that have started with a spoofed email. And these emails are difficult to spot. They are no longer rife with spelling errors and poor grammar. Government, industry, universities, small businesses, and individuals are all at risk. Constant vigilance is required to defend against these emails. But it is not enough. The human factor is a weak link in the line of defense. I think that's something that we've all heard time and time again. And the truth is, it always will be. We need to figure out how to bolster the defenses and ease some of that burden. And there are ways that we can do that. DMARC is a protocol that allows for that. It is freely available for anyone or any organization to use. DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. It's not a cure-all or a silver bullet, but when implemented correctly, it defends against some of the very worst kinds of phishing. Spoofed domains, where someone takes your domain and phishes you, your customers, and others, breaching the trust in your brand and exploiting your good name for malicious means. So with that, it is my honor to introduce my colleague and Director of Operations for the Global Cyber Alliance, Shahzad Mirza, and he's going to talk to us about the state of DMARC.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, I'm going to talk about the state of DMARC, and before we get into it, I'm just going to talk a little bit about DMARC just to give a little background of what it is and how it actually kind of works. So as Amy said, DMARC stands for Domain-Based Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. So what it is a protocol that's going to use existing authentication mechanisms and provide a layer of protection for your email domain. So this way you don't have attackers or spoofers or any unauthorized sources from actually using your email domain. And this is one of the only protocols that are out there that will do this kind of thing. So those phishing and anti-spam tools will mainly help against other organizations or things that are coming out that look really like phishing and really like spam. So it's basically acting as an identity check for your domain. So the way this works is there has to be two parts to this. There's the policy, and then there's the verification side. So the sending organization has to create the policy. So in that policy, they're going to define what to do with that message if it were to fail some of those authentication checks. Should it put it into the spam or junk folder? Should it completely drop it? Or should it just let it pass, depending on which policy level you decide to implement? The verification side has to be on the recipient side. So the recipient needs to make sure and detect for those DMARC incoming messages with the DMARC capability. So it both has to be at the sender side and the receiving side in order for this to fully function and fully work. So what the benefit is, and the main one is the fact, obviously, to prevent spammers and phishers from using your domain. That's the main thing. So you're protecting your brand by doing this. So and protecting your reputation. So you're creating a trust aspect to it when it comes to doing this. So you're increasing customer confidence and trust. But not only really your customers, but also for your own employees and your business partners as well when you implement something like this. So before I get into it, so what I want to show you is a small video. It's a little high-level video that explains DMARC and help give you a better understanding of DMARC.
Email is critical to your business. It's how you communicate and collaborate. It's how you connect with customers, build loyalty for your brand, and drive sales online. But what if customers stop receiving your emails? What if your emails always landed in the junk folder? Even worse, what if customers receive emails from your brand, but the messages contain malware or phishing scams? These risks are all too real, and they can cost your business millions. That's why email authentication is so important. It's a critical step in protecting your brand. There's a tool called DMARC that solves this challenge for you, and it's free for your organization to set up. DMARC tells a recipient's email server that your message is authentic, safe, and important. It improves the delivery rate of the email you send to customers and ensures your email doesn't get flagged as spam. Most importantly, DMARC prevents hackers from hijacking your company's email domain. You won't have to worry about malware or phishing scams being launched using your domain, and your internal network will be more resilient against inbound threats. With DMARC, your domain and your brand reputation will be protected. The Global Cyber Alliance has created a free DMARC setup guide to help you implement DMARC on your company's email domain. In just a few simple steps, you can ensure your email marketing is getting delivered and getting the results you need. Boost your revenue, reduce your risk. Set up DMARC today.
So this video here is giving a high level of what's going on with DMARC. It is also available on the GCA website, on our YouTube channel, and it's also in Spanish. We are going to be releasing additional languages as well. So in terms of the current state of DMARC, so DMARC on the consumer side has actually been doing quite well. So as you can see here, there's 4.8 billion inboxes now are protected with DMARC. So when we're talking about the consumer side, we're talking about Gmail, the Hotmails, Yahoo, and so on. Those are the boxes that are already protected because those organizations either participated in the creation of DMARC or have decided now, okay, we need to adopt DMARC and do something to protect our constituents and our consumers. So it's about 76% of the current total worldwide which is a great increase, especially compared to 2015, which was 2.7 billion in 2015. So now this is a consumer side. So what's important is that we now need the other side, the businesses, the governments, and so on, to start adopting DMARC, so that way this effort that was put into place here is recognized and is stronger. So just to show you some statistics, so like the federal government side, so actually, based on the charts, the numbers look pretty low, but it's actually quite impressive for the federal government. Their numbers actually quite increased since May until October. So it's been relatively high. So non-quarantine, reject are going to be the different policy levels. None is the lowest, reject being the highest. There's no errors, so they actually did well in terms of the implementation. But there's still a high number that are implemented and that have not anything implemented on their end. So they do need to work to get it, but the numbers are getting into the quarantine and reject relatively quickly on a month-by-month basis. It's actually much better than some of the other organizations are doing. So the RSA attendees back in February, which was the first scan, was still quite low in terms of nothing implemented, but they are moving to none and then quarantine and reject. But it's important that all these organizations, the RSA attendees or the ones in the expos, they need to make sure that they get into the quarantine and the reject levels. Same with the Alexa 100 in finance. So finance is actually one of the sectors that is doing quite well in terms of the adoption of DMARC. They still have a ways to go, as you can see, because the total is still high and the no policies is still level, but there are much more in the reject level than there are in the quarantine. And these are the top 100 companies ranked by the current market capitalization. Again, doing a little bit better, but there's still too many in the none area. We need to make sure that people get into quarantine and reject, because none is kind of like monitoring mode. So it's just kind of taking a look at what's going on with the messages, what do they need to do in terms of troubleshooting and making adjustments so they can move up to quarantine and reject. And then here the Fortune 500 DMARC adoption rate, so across all the different sectors. This is a chart supplied via Gari's report. So as you can see here, business services, finances, technology is actually quite high in terms of the implementation rate, but it's still only 60% in terms of implementation, and that's going with the different aspects. So red is going to be non-quarantine is the amber, and green is the reject. So you can still see across the board, none is still quite high. So it's still key for people to move up into quarantine and reject in order to have the full impact in the implementation of DMARC. So, but again, just to reiterate the benefits of DMARC. So you have different benefits. One is obviously going to be the brand protection, right? So you're protecting your domain, you're protecting your organization by doing this, you're protecting your employees, you're protecting your constituents and your customers, and therefore preventing frauds, preventing the increasing of phishing, increasing the customer's confidence and trust. But then including the inbox protection, right? Because once you have the verification enabled for your own organization, you're now protecting your organization. So it's already done on the consumer side, but the businesses and so on the different sectors need to do so as well. And the other key part is the visibility. Visibility is very important, because how do you know what's going on with those messages? You could have one of these authentication mechanisms enabled, but have no idea whether it's actually working or not. What is actually happening to those messages? Are they getting delivered? Are they being dropped? Are they putting in the spam and quarantine folder? So that DMARC is one of those tools that will provide that report. So as long as the analysis of that report is being done, you will know what's going on with those messages. It's just a matter of taking that time and doing that analysis. And it's not only going to give you the spammers and phishers. In some cases we've seen it where it actually gives you a nice IT asset inventory. Sometimes the IT staff doesn't always know what the marketing team or the other organizations within the company might be doing. This is a way to find out. And then you have now a tighter control on making sure that the email is only being done and approved through the security or the IT staff at that point. So Gari's also provided some return on investment for DMARC. So like I said, by implementation, it gave 326% return on investment, 4 million increase in customer engagement, 1.1 million reduced need for customer support, right? Because then everything that's going through should be legitimate, and there shouldn't be any questions in terms of what's going on with those emails. 718,000 reduced cost of cybersecurity insurance. So a large number there in terms of dollar amounts. And then 10% rise in response rate to email campaigns. So these are, it just shows just the effectiveness of DMARC. And if I remember right, the report was with 4 different sectors. across. One was health, one was finance, and I'm not quite sure what the other two were. So it's quite a large amount in terms of what's going on in getting that return on investment just by implementing DMARC. I mean, some organizations, they had, like at NESED, about 60 million fraudulent emails were prevented every year just by implementing DMARC. Her Majesty's Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs in the United Kingdom, they said about 300 million fraudulent emails just by implementing DMARC. So that's a large amount. So what people need to do is obviously implement DMARC. Learn about what it is. Implement it on your organization. Do both the policy side and the verification side. So we have our website, dmarc.globalcyberalliance.org. And this site, we actually have a setup guide. So there's a setup guide that will help you go through the process and do the implementation. Tell you this is what your record needs to look like in order to set it up. Nice thing about it, it's available in different languages. And it does give you a rating, and it is very effective. We've seen quite a lot of people over the past year have used this. We've gotten close to 10,000 domains that have been tried on our site with about 19.5% conversion rate. So some level of DMARC. So it is effective. People are using it, people are seeing it, either learning about it or just using this to do the actual process through it. So we do recommend that people go to this site, use it, and contact us if there are any questions. And this is for anybody. So anywhere from small businesses to large businesses, government, health sector, doesn't matter. Anyone and everyone who has a domain, an email domain, should be implementing DMARC. At this point, turn it back to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you, Shazad. Thank you for that overview of DMARC and what it does. So with that, I would like to introduce the Department of Homeland Security's Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communication, Jeanette Manfred.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It's always nice to get out of DC, even if it's only for a few hours. I wanted to start with just a little overview of my organization for those of you who are less familiar with what the department does in cybersecurity. So I run our organization's Office of Cybersecurity and Communications, and we have two primary missions. The first is to lead the federal government's work on federal civilian cybersecurity, and which is most of what I'll talk about today. And we do that through a variety of ways. The Office of Management and Budget sets high-level policy. Every agency head, like every company, CEO is responsible for their own cybersecurity. But the department provides a lot of capability, shared services, et cetera, out to federal agencies to help them have a more sufficient defense in depth for their networks and systems. We also have authority for measuring agency cybersecurity, as well as also directing their activities, and which is a little bit what I'll talk about in a moment. The second primary mission is around critical infrastructure, which is a little bit what I'll talk about in a moment. The second primary mission is around critical infrastructure and engagement voluntarily to those entities in, say, state and local governments who would like them. A lot of it is focused on information sharing. So when we learn things in the government, whether that's through law enforcement, intelligence community, or other channels, ensuring that that information gets out to the network defenders in the United States and increasingly globally. We have a lot of organizations that are similar to mine built up these information sharing 24/7 watch centers around the globe. Within the UK, we have a strong partnership with the National Cybersecurity Center there. And so we're continuing to build this capability to better defend our networks across the globe. And in National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which it is this month, for those of you who weren't tracking, our theme is shared responsibility. And as I'm sure most of you know, the internet is based off of trust. And the internet can only work as we know it if we maintain that trust. And that means this shared responsibility. It is not just one organization. It's not just the United States federal government that can assure the security of the internet. We have to work together. And DMARC represents a very important part of that. And it can't just be the ISPs. It has to be every organization. And this is what I really like about DMARC is it's not complicated. Cybersecurity can be very daunting discipline to take on, particularly for those who didn't grow up around computers. And it's important, I believe, to take discrete, tangible steps that will have a very scalable, broad impact across the global ecosystem. And the United States can be a leader in this. And so one of our authorities is the ability to issue something called a binding operational directive. And that's where the department tells departments and agencies across the civilian government that they have to implement the guidance. And we have done this in a few cases. Today, the acting secretary is going to issue a binding operational directive to tell agencies to implement DMARC. And in a couple of other protocols around encryption to increase email security. We're also issuing some guidance on web security. Both the government and our citizens that depend upon interaction with the government deserve a trusted relationship. So if an email is coming to you from the IRS or from FEMA, you need to believe and trust that it is an email from the IRS or FEMA. And as the statistics noted, we have been working to implement DMARC and some of the underlying protocols over the past year or so. And in the springtime, we did start to encourage greater adoption. We felt in talking with all the agencies that we needed a little bit of a push to get people to really prioritize and focus on this. So the directive will give agencies 30 days to develop a plan for implementation of DMARC, and it'll give them 90 days to get from that not implemented category to the none category at a minimum. And then over the next year, we're going to work to get 100% over to the reject policy, if you recall from the bar graphs previously. We will also be directing agencies to implement START TLS, which is another sort of protocol to improve email security. On the web security side, we will be directing all agencies to implement HTTPS for all web services and federal websites. And so this is to ensure that anyone engaging with the federal government in the United States via a federal website or web services delivered via those web portals are able to have a more secure connection. And so I believe this is really important. I'm really excited to announce this, particularly in partnership with the Global Cyber Alliance and the New York. I think this is one of those examples of a true public-private partnership across levels of government with the private sector, and an example of how the federal government is a participant in the internet and that we take our responsibility just as seriously as everybody else does. So that sort of sums up our points here, and I'm happy to take any questions after this part is done. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And let me be the first to commend and applaud the decision of the Department of Homeland Security to deploy DMARC and take this leadership position. And hopefully we will see industry also start to follow in the footsteps of the federal government on this issue. And so with that, it is now time to hear from the state of New York. Please welcome Deborah Snyder, the Chief Information Security Officer.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, as you know, and thanks, Jeanette, for your remarks, as you know, email is a critical communication conducted for all business in the state of New York, and we rely on it to conduct the day-to-day operations of business and government, communicate with our stakeholders, specifically the citizens of the state of New York. Email is also a major vulnerability point for most organizations, so we have to be vigilant to keep bad actors at bay and to protect against fraudulent and malicious email, and it's a constant battle. As part of the state's information technology transformation efforts over the past few years, we recently consolidated 51 separate email systems into a single centralized email service that we provide back to the state agencies. Over 1 million emails are sent every day, and over 3 million are received across this centralized system. Under the leadership of State CIO Robert Sampson, the New York State Office of Information Technology Services has taken steps to reduce cybersecurity risk to the email system. We've deployed DMARC, and we're relating all of the different protocols that significantly reduce malicious phishing and spoofed emails entering or being sent from the state's centralized email system. These DMARC policies provide authentication and verification, as mentioned, that our email is trustworthy, making it much more difficult for bad actors to use New York State's good name in malicious email campaigns to target employees, citizens, and those we do business with. DMARC reporting functions, as Shazad mentioned, will make it so much more easy for us to get a better understanding of what's attacking our email system and where those threats are coming from. Given the prevalence of sophisticated malware that's out there, we are also implementing email threat protection at our border to aggressively block email containing malicious URLs and attachments. We urge all organizations to take the same. We are working on policy as well as a directive at the state level, and we join the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Global Security Alliance in championing the adoption of DMARC. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Deborah. Now, we have a few folks here with us from industry whom I've invited to come up here and also make some remarks on this issue. We have with us Brian Keemsoff, Senior Director of Global Security with Aetna, Gary Mazzette, the Global Head of Messaging and Collaboration with Marcia McLennan, and is Tom Brennan on the Global Board of Directors for OWASP, and Chris Gundeman with the ISOC. So if you gentlemen would like to come up here where the microphones are, we'll put some chairs up. Has very much been a leader in DMARC and quite vocal about the actions that they've taken.
Good morning. My name is Brian Keemsoff. I am the Senior Director of Global Security at Aetna. And on behalf of Aetna, I'd like to congratulate the Department of Homeland Security, the State of New York, and the City of New York on their commitment to maintaining the integrity and security of email exchanges and through the adoption of the DMARC standards. Aetna implemented DMARC in 2015 and has found DMARC standards to be incredibly effective at eliminating the risk of email address impersonation attacks targeting our organization and our members. Such tactics are commonly used in conjunction with phishing and malware delivery, targeting credentials and sensitive data. DMARC is far and away the most effective countermeasure in maintaining the integrity of our email interactions. Implementing this approach has yielded tremendous positive benefits to our members, healthcare providers, business associates, and employees. DMARC gives these groups confidence in knowing that when an email is addressed from Aetna, it's from Aetna. I would also like to urge that all organizations and government entities explore leveraging the resources provided by the Global Cyber Alliance. Implementing DMARC can not only help improve email security for your respective organizations, but can also further our overall mission for creating a safer internet for everyone.
Hi there, thank you. My name is Chris Gundeman. I'm the principal architect for Myriad, which is an IT solution provider here in Manhattan. But today I'm speaking on behalf of the Internet Society, ISOC, which we try to stick with the Internet Society because there's a bunch of acronyms that get jumbled there. The Internet Society is a global nonprofit that seeks to ensure that the Internet is for everyone. Part of that is they're the administrative home for the IETF, which is the standards body which created SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So these protocols are free and available to you because of the IETF, which is home through the Internet Society. In addition, the Internet Society, as of April 2017, adopted the Online Trust Alliance as an initiative. The Online Trust Alliance seeks to protect consumers through privacy and security by listing best practices and allowing membership for leadership, innovation, and collaboration. As of September 26th, we've signed an affiliation agreement with the GCA, so we're happy to support all these efforts and really look forward to increased adoption of DMARC.
Gary Mazzette. I work as the head of messaging and collaboration for Marsh & McLennan. We're a global 60,000 colleague company in insurance, professional and financial services. And my job is to secure the mail flow, because I think it's been said a number of times that really email is the primary means of communication and the enabler of commerce. So, you've got phishing attacks coming in purporting to be our CEO on a fairly regular basis, and we're looking to lock that kind of stuff down. So we have implemented DMARC, and we have actually started blocking quarantining mail. Since we started quarantining mail, we've quarantined 2.5 million messages. We are moving towards getting to full reject policy this year. There's not much I can add. I can just say this: everybody should be jumping on board with this, and on both sides, right? So, from the sender, from your domain ownership, you really need to lock that down and get the policies in place and get your reporting in place so you can really understand what's going on out there with your brand. But on the recipient part too, you've got to actually honor DMARC, right? So if people put a DMARC policy out there and you're not honoring it, you're going to allow garbage in, and you really want to prevent that. So you have to take steps in both areas. There are vendors out there that can help large enterprises. We've certainly engaged with a couple. Smaller groups, you may be smart and able to code and do parsing of XML and do your own reporting. There are also smaller vendors out there that can help with reporting. So, you can't do this without the reporting. Reporting is key, right? Otherwise, you're blind. You don't know if you've got a vendor out there that somebody in marketing has contracted with. Without the reporting, you won't know that they're there. So you have to look at that aspect of it as well. So my final comment is it is a journey, and the sooner you start, the sooner you get to securing that aspect of your mail flow.
Great, thank you. My name is Tom Brennan. I'm the America's Chairman for Crest International, as well as on the Global Board of Directors for OWASP Foundation, which is 55,000 members around the world focused on software security. So our organizations both applaud not only the efforts of the organizations involved, but this is certainly a step forward to ensure better communication and security on all fronts. In the private sector, I act as an ethical hacker. I've been doing so for over 20 years. At the time that this goes into effect, this does raise the bar. It does cause a little bit additional issues for attackers on that space. And of course, there are also edge cases. Edge cases is an example of mailing lists that many people subscribe to and utilize. So when we look at ARC and other things that IETF is working on in other areas there's always room for improvement in security. We should not completely believe this solves all problems, but it's certainly a right step in the right direction.
Great, thank you. So this time we'd like to open the floor to questions, and I believe the Assistant Secretary is going to be back in just a minute so she can answer questions as well.
I think my question's probably for you. My name is Brady Dale, I write for The Observer. I just want to know how, and Mr. Brennan just mentioned this, how do third-party mailing lists fit in? Like, so if you're doing a lot of your marketing through MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever, and it sort of sounds like you still need to implement it at your server level, right? So yeah, so just how do they fit into the story?
Oh, great question.
Yeah, so I might be able to help address that. So certainly, sorry. Thanks. So certainly at a provider level that provides services like that for mass mailing, there's lots of services in the space like SendGrid and others. Those services can be configured with authoritative process with the organization to ensure that that process continues to happen for the organization. My mention of ban lists is probably an edge case. An edge case of individuals that have a .gov or a .NY address, whatever it may be, that they're on a mailing list, and then the mailing list actually appends or posts components into a mailing list percent feeds other people. So when you have a certificate-based review of mail and then forwards along that chain, you want non-repudiation, right? You're looking for the ability to have a flow of data. So the idea of mailing lists is an edge case, again, but the majority of the communication going to and from is from an end user to an agency. And in this case, this is a very big step forward. That answers your question.
Yeah, so then just to add on to that too. So there are like the third-party vendors as well. They are actually adopting DMARC capabilities.
That's the question. My question though is like, so if I'm a podcaster, right, and I've got a 1 million person mailing list, it's not enough, right, that like MailChimp implements this, right? Like I still need to do it inside my company.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so you'll still, even if you use like those third-party vendors to do those things, working with them, you'll have to implement certain capabilities in order to allow for DMARC to work.
And if you're using a third party, you're going to need to talk to your third party on some level.
In some cases, yes.
Okay.
So like MailChimp and SurveyMonkey, Salesforce, they actually publish it online. So they'll give you the steps and shorts in terms of implementation and making sure your DMARC works correctly.
Okay.
If they don't, then yes, you'll have to work with those third party vendors.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nikki from CyberScoop. I guess my question is for you as well. I'm curious if the tech or sort of intention beyond this can be extended to other types of messaging platforms. If we've got entities using Skype, Slack, how can this be expanded to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen cases where people are using, because like, Skype and so on, they actually have an add something, so they kind of almost act like an email address in a way. So, I mean, if there's something that seems email type, we can always add and implement a DMARC record or create policy for it. We've seen actually quite a few people start using it for websites. So not necessarily www, but they may use it for their what their website domain is, but not necessarily their email domain. So they'll implement it for both. Even though, I mean, technically though, it is designed just for email.
So this is Malcolm Klein from Salesforce. I understand that DMARC works really well and integrates nicely with SPF and DKIM. From your perspectives as thought leaders and adopters, I'm interested in what suggestions do you provide to others who are looking to potentially move to DMARC in terms of first perhaps implementing SPF and DKIM. What are your thoughts in terms of somebody knowing perhaps from just a nothing reasonable approaches to implementing this?
Yes, that's a great question. So DMARC is actually somewhat of an overlay over SPF and DKIM. If you haven't implemented SPF and DKIM, then DMARC won't actually do anything for you. So you definitely have to start with, so SPF basically ties your domain to an IP address for your mail server so that people can verify that mail actually came from a server that you've authorized to send mail for your domain. DKIM then allows you to sign messages so you can prove that the mail has not been changed and again tie it back to your domain. DMARC then really provides the policy framework and the reporting framework on top of those two technologies. So a DMARC will allow email to come through if either SPF or DKIM says it's okay, and then it also replies back to the sender at an address you define to tell you when email is accepted and when it's not and why. So you definitely start with SPF and DKIM, and then DMARC is kind of the third piece that completes the puzzle, so you can have that reporting as well as the policy enforcement. Because if you don't use DMARC, if you just use DKIM, then it's up to the receiver to decide how they treat mail that doesn't meet your requirements. Whereas with DMARC, you actually say quarantine it, drop it, or let it through. So you specifically state that policy to the sender, so that's a communication layer there.
Yeah. That was a great comment. I would also add that the enforcement policy that was just referenced provides the ability to get started here and not take on the risk of having your emails bounced because of a misconfiguration, right? It allows you to jump in, stick your toe in the water, and proceed slowly from there. And as you develop your policies further, then you get to the drop and the block, and you minimize that risk for customer impact.
Any additional questions for our?
Do you want to pass it? So I guess my question is for anyone who's sort of part of an organization or entity is how we educate our consumers on taking the time to do this extra step when we have troubles getting them to even complicate their emails a little bit more, their passwords.
Sure, I'll share my perspective. I think there's a real opportunity to market this type of functionality, especially myself being part of a healthcare organization. It's not every day that we get to go out on Twitter and go out in our marketing material and say, hey, look at what we're doing to help secure you and your data and your sensitive PHI, your personal health information. That allows us to establish a competitive advantage, and it's important for our organization. But it's something else to consider is properly implemented DMARC and the underlying protocols are transparent to the user and transparent to the consumer. So it's important to help them see that these things all kind of happen behind the scenes, kind of like the secret sauce, to an individual consumer, and they reap all the benefits without the impacts.
So, I think that there's something else that has to happen. There's another side of it. There's the return on investment side for DMARC is pretty powerful in the slides that Shazad laid out. The research that Agari did shows that there's a really tremendous return on investment, that not only are you protecting your email systems and thereby your employees and customers, but you're also have the potential to bolster the delivery of your email marketing, which some companies make a tremendous investment in that. And if that is all going to the spam folder on the other end, then that's an investment that's lost. So there's that. With the delivery, better delivery of those emails, you potentially could see increased revenues. There's some evidence that indicates that. And I also think that we have to work to educate the executive suite so that they understand why investment in protecting their email is important, both from the return on investment and the risk side, as well as we also need to work to make sure that boards of directors, those people who are holding these companies accountable, are asking the questions about what are you doing to bolster your cybersecurity, to reduce your risk. And DMARC is one thing, it's just one thing among a myriad of other things, one thing that any organization can do to put their email in a better position to reduce some of that risk. It doesn't reduce all of the risk, but it certainly reduces quite a bit of that risk. So the Assistant Secretary has returned, so if anybody has questions for her, I think we would welcome some now as well on her announcement.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm with CyberScoop. So my question is about potential extensions of this to other sort of third-party contractors along your supply chain, in addition to just mandating compliance within certain federal agencies. Is there any sort of timeline in the future of expanding this?
Good question. Right now we are just focused on the government agencies adopting this. Now, if they've contracted for their mail service, then that would be one way of getting at it. From a procurement perspective, that's not included in this directive, but we are looking at a variety of ways to use our procurement purchasing power, if you will, to make some as well.
Perhaps I can thank you. Perhaps another comment about this is to dumb it down for people that need to get on board, right? The conversation around coming through the door this morning to get into this building and going through a screening system, a profiling system, identifying who has legitimate access to come upstairs to be in the room, that sort of conversation. Well, this inbox is much smaller than 8 million people. So that's kind of the process that people want to understand, is that we're going to help reduce legitimate communications, and that's actually a very important aspect of it. Not to say that you can't circumvent that or you can't go ahead and disrupt the workflow, but at the beginning of the conversation, it's mitigating access to the inbox, which is everyone is getting flooded with illegitimate emails.
I guess sort of a follow-up to that. Will there be, in terms of the regular sort of compliance reporting you had talked about, will there be any sort of like internal red teaming, sort of generally testing all the entities to make sure they're doing this the right way and they're seeing the results that they're supposed to have?
Yeah, we actually already we do a couple of things. We have a team that regularly scans the federal government, so all internet-facing systems. And so we have started scanning for DMARC and HTTPS, and start scanning for Start TLS soon. We also have a team that regularly conducts red teaming assessments of systems within the government. We prioritize the ones that we've identified as what we call high-value assets. So systems that, if they, the data, whether it was the integrity or availability of them was compromised, would have significant consequences for the government. So we do regular vulnerability assessments and scanning of those as well.
So we have our first question from online. Joe Util from The Hill asks, can you provide more details on the HTTPS requirements?
The directive will be published soon, so the specific timelines, I just can't quite remember off the top of my head. But basically what we're requiring is all federal websites and web services delivered from the federal government will be HTTPS compliant. I want to say it's within 120 days, but I'll check my sites on that.
With valid certificates.
Huh?
With valid certificates.
And HSTS enabled, yeah.
Any additional questions? So with that, I would like to thank all of you for coming and joining us today, all of our panelists, and Deborah Snyder from the state, and Assistant Secretary Jeanette Manfred. Thank you so much for joining us today.